to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Welcome to the show. It is Thursday, August 20th, and we are back yet again.
It's a turkey.
Ooh,
Three in a row.
Yeah,
hungry.
We're here. It's Thursday, and we're back, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to talk fantasy football all day long. This is the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. I'm Andy Holloway, joined by Jason Moore.
Howdy, howdy.
And Mike, the Fantasy Hitman, right?
Duty.
Ooh. Hey, you know, LaShawn McCoy is going to be okay.
Maybe. I think
Someone told me that.
there's someone who is not, though.
Do we wait for that? I'm talking about
Sure.
K-Ben.
It's a secret.
Welcome to the show. This is the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. You can visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFBallers. We're here every day bringing you the latest in fantasy football news information. We got our rankings today. We're going through quarterbacks. We have JJ Zachariason, the editor-in-chief over at Numberfire, talking streaming quarterback strategy with us today. Very excited about that discussion. And we have a quick question for the day. You guys ready for this one?
Yeah,
Go.
Shoot.
All right, who has moved up the most in your rankings since the preseason began? So in the last week or so, who has moved up the most? Or who are you most excited about?
That would be easier if we just tracked it. But I think that the person who has moved up my rankings the most has been Christopher Ivory. Chris Ivory has moved up my rankings the most because it's clear now that there's nobody behind him that is really going to compete with him for the job.
Hey,
so
Zach Stacy is very upset right now.
yes, I think Zach Stacy's been upset for a little while.
He actually specializes in not competing for the job.
Yeah, and it also looks like Stephen Ridley's gonna begin the season on the PUP. So Bilal Powell is just gonna be more of a gadget use there. So I think Chris Ivory, and you watch that first preseason game. I said this on another podcast, but 6 of the first 7 plays were running plays to Chris Ivory, and that's it's
What
just
are you
shows
doing
me
on
that,
other podcasts without us?
Oh, you were there, bud.
Oh, okay. I didn't remember.
You were there. So, he's a starting running back, a talented running back for an offense that's planning to try to run the ball a lot. He's not in a timeshare, so he's moved up to about 20 for me.
The man who has moved up the most for me would be Brandon Cooks, mostly because I was extremely low on him, and I'm finally just coming around. And while I'm not as gung-ho as some of the people out there saying wide receiver 1, but he's moved up my rankings a good bit.
I was going to go with another Saints guy, too. There's a few guys. I talked about McCoy. Obviously, he had climbed up a little bit based on what I had seen in preseason and the fact that nobody seems to be behind him, but now he's hurt. So I'm going to just hold off on using him in this example. I think Hilton has moved up a little bit for me.
Really?
Probably into that top 12 range because of the commitment made by that team. Honestly,
right.
it makes a difference to me because you have one of the best quarterbacks in football, but you didn't know with the drafting of Dorsett whether they were committing to Hilton or not. And so that matters to me. And the other guy we're talking about is another Brandon in New Orleans. And
yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
who today or last night, Sean Payton said he was the camp MVP. He has an opportunity to be a starting wide receiver for New Orleans. So
That'd be crazy.
yeah, so he could be a name to pay attention to. He's certainly worth a flyer because you get him for free right now.
At this point, absolutely. I think every format should be picking him up.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk some more news.
News and notes from around the league.
All right, the big news we broke at the beginning of the show yesterday was
Secrets.
this was Kelvin Benjamin. He had gone down in practice. A lot of concern initially. Some reports came out, said maybe just a sprained knee. Not the case.
Nope.
Torn ACL.
Out.
See you later.
Goodbye.
Not good for Cam Newton.
Terrible for Cam Newton.
Well, here is the counter that I will say to Cam Newton. Cam Newton's fantasy value comes from him running the ball. Would you think he would run more or less
I think
in this
he'll
situation?
run. I think he'll run more, and that is where his value comes from. But he's also going to throw for fewer touchdowns and fewer yards. So I think it'll pretty much work itself out to be about neutral.
What's good for Cam is that he's now set up for another year of excuses as we go into next year drafting him.
Uh-oh.
Because that was the reframe this year.
Yeah.
It was he didn't have the weapons. Well, he's not going to have – his only weapon was Kelvin Benjamin and Greg Olsen.
And now his only weapon is Devin Funchess, who's a poor man's Kevin Benjamin.
Andy hates what I've been calling him.
Oh, I love it.
No, he's extended this.
It keeps getting longer.
Oh,
it keeps getting worse.
Now it is Count Von Bunches of Funchess.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
That's
no.
It's going to get longer.
I like
I like bunches of Funchess.
I like bunches of Funchess
That's
too.
fantastic. It's catchy. Count Von Bunches of Funchess. That makes no sense.
No.
That's the point.
Oh,
well,
come on.
No, you got to
It
get
doesn't make any sense.
Get
so
a hold
it's
of
not funny.
yourself. Don't worry, we won't be saying it. Like I said, big news about, so Sean Payton came out. He talked about C.J. Spiller. Should be ready for week 1 for those concerned about Spiller. I'd still be concerned about Spiller.
Yeah.
Only because he's in a new location with a new injury. So you just put those things together. You have to mitigate that risk. I like him in PPR, but
And we know that Fred Jackson was not behind this one.
we don't think so.
Well,
We
he's
don't
got the
know for
long
sure.
con going.
Do you realize Anthony Dixon's seriously injured in Buffalo too? There's no one
Everyone
left.
in Buffalo is
I'm
injured.
not
McCoy,
saying.
Carlos Williams with some mystery illness.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Can we get him
There-
on the show? No.
Someone needs to look into this.
What do you guys think about David Cobb? Their GM came out and said he's been a player that stood out. Obviously, Sankey had a bad first year, but indications, at least from preseason game 1, was that Sankey's going to be that guy, at least initially. Do we like Cobb as a late round lottery ticket?
Yeah.
You guys, both of your faces say
When GMs
You're
come
not-
out and say, the guy that I just drafted looked real good, it just doesn't hold
they
too
have
much
to be
water
telling
with
the
me.
truth.
Yeah, well, yeah, it just doesn't hold too much water. I do think that he's a worthy flyer. I mean, he's a rookie running back coming into a team that the guy in front of him wasn't that good last year. So any situation like that is good, but, it's not on a very high-power offense, and there's a reason he, wasn't drafted till the 5th round.
So a couple bits of Melvin Gordon-related news came out today. One bit was that he's probably going to miss the next game, which not a big issue, but a minor ankle injury. There was another report that came out that said that they were going to lean on him very heavily this season as a run-orientated, run-first and second down type of offense. Does that change your opinion about Gordon?
No.
Just hearing them say that?
That's what I figured they were going to
Yeah.
try and do.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so where are you drafting Gordon?
Third
round?
I would
Second
not.
round?
I would not take him until the 4th round, which means that I will probably not.
You will
be
have him in
drafting
no league,
him.
sir.
Yep.
Correct.
We're in complete agreement there.
All right, we're going to move on to the
Hey,
what?
Mike Upati.
Ah.
No, that's important news. When you're talking about an all-star guard goes down, that severely affects Andre Ellington, Carson Palmer, all the wide receivers.
So give the news, Mike.
Mike Upati is out 6 to 8 weeks. He had
Cardinals left guard.
Yeah, sorry. He had arthroscopic knee surgery. I just figure everyone loves Upati as much as I do.
No, and that's almost why I skipped that piece of news because I wasn't sure how impactful it would be.
Oh, I think it's very impactful. So Ellington, we already know the running holes were small in Arizona. They're going to get smaller. So you got to beware of this situation.
Yeah,
All right.
so get off on Chris Johnson. I know everyone was all excited, but wait, that didn't sound very good. Get off of the Chris Johnson hype. All right, moving along.
All right. FantasyDraftWizard.com. Why don't you tell us about that, Jason?
All right, well, since it's something I use every single day, I can tell you go to FantasyDraftWizard.com, do your mock drafts. People ask all the time, what's the best thing I could do? What's the one piece of information that, the one piece of advice that will help me win my draft? And it's do mock drafts.
Draft Kelvin Benjamin.
Yeah, don't do that. Do mock drafts. Do it at FantasyDraftWizard.com. They take a minute or two. They're free. They're very easy, and you can gain a lot of preparation.
All right, one of the things we talk about on this show a lot is philosophies about quarterbacks. People email us all the time, tweet us questions, and the questions normally, they go like this. They go, which quarterback do I draft in the first round? I mean, that's the way a lot of questions go, and that's because people value quarterbacks very, very highly because of total points scored. They don't value or consider, they don't consider scarcity. And so we tell people to wait on quarterbacks, and another guy that kind of was at the forefront of this was J.J. Zachariason, editor-in-chief of Numberfire. So we've got him on the show. Let's talk to him right now.
You talking to me?
The Fantasy Footballers are now joined by JJ Zachariason, editor-in-chief from Numberfire and co-host of the Live in the Stream podcast. What's going on, JJ?
Not too much. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, we really appreciate it. We are big fans of the show, of the podcast, and Numberfire's not too shabby. It's all right.
Yeah, it's okay.
But so we're gonna talk quarterbacks, and we thought no one better to talk quarterbacks than the late round QB himself. So, JJ, how would you explain streaming quarterbacks to someone who's never heard of the concept? And why is it a viable strategy? We talk it a lot, but we want to hear your words. How would you explain it?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about it is it's kind of this supply and demand equation. You know, in fantasy football, there's 12 teams typically, even if there's 10 or 8 or 14, doesn't matter. In most leagues, you're only starting one quarterback. So in total, at most, if you're in a 14-team league, let's say, then there's 14 quarterbacks being started every single week in your fantasy league. Given that last year, 41 different quarterbacks, that's 9 more than there are teams in the NFL had at least one top 12 performance, so a QB1 performance. You can see that there's just this surplus of quarterbacks in this new NFL. There's not as big of a gap between say in terms of fantasy. In terms of real football, it's a different story, but there's not as big of a gap between maybe the third best quarterback in the league. I'll exclude Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck in that conversation. But, you know, someone like a Drew Brees to a Ryan Tannehill, let's say. So, but then, you know, what streaming then is taking advantage of the predictability aspect of the quarterback position. So, you know, just very logically, very high level, you think of predictability as which position or which players are going to be most predictable before heading into a week. So you're not doing any hindsight analysis. You're thinking what's going to happen. And in terms of quarterbacks, you know, quarterbacks are dropping back to pass at least 30 times per game, almost every single quarterback. So you have this larger sample size compared to what you get at a running back and wide receiver and a tight end especially. So therefore, they're just more predictable. There's a lot of math behind that as well. So because of this predictability and because of this surplus, you can pinpoint good matchups for these quarterbacks and kind of build this giant Frankenstein quarterback.
And that's really the next question I had for you, is because the numbers back up the streaming quarterback philosophy, and we talk about it a lot, but that means a owner has to make a lot of decisions. And so, like what you said, the quarterback matchups, what do you look for in those QB matchups? How do people make those decisions? Because it's easy to look at, you know, the hindsight and say, okay, these 5 guys did well last week, but how do you make the pick to start those guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very good question, because it's obviously you need to have the confidence going in and not, you know, you're going to be throwing Mark Sanchez under center and on your fantasy team and doesn't feel comfortable. But the one thing to stress is to really use Vegas to your advantage. Team totals are very, very important. There's a high correlation between fantasy output at the quarterback position and how many points Vegas thinks that team is going to score, because obviously if a team scores a lot of points, it's because of the quarterback. Some things that people tend to overrate is the idea of garbage time. So I actually just did a presentation last 2 weekends ago in Atlanta for the Daily Fantasy Boot Camp, and a quote that I used in the presentation was, it takes a garbage performance to create garbage time. So the only reason why these quarterbacks are in this garbage time in the first place is because they didn't perform well during the first, second, and third quarters of the game. So really, there's actually no correlation between passing attempts and fantasy output. So people tend to overrate what passing attempts do to a quarterback performance, but what you really should be pinpointing is the efficiency side of things and those Vegas team totals. And if the quarterback is a favorite, if a quarterback is a favorite in those games, he's going to be more efficient, and therefore they're going to score more points.
So who are you then right now? Because we're still, you know, obviously pre-draft. We're not anywhere but pre-week 1. And so who are you targeting right now in the draft, a late round guy or someone that you hope will become and maybe stick as a quarterback one that you think you can get late in the draft?
Yeah, so I think that's another key point too, is that when you're going into your draft, you're not necessarily going in saying, hey, I'm going to stream the position. I think that you can more than ever do that, but at the same time, you want to find a guy that could potentially become like a plug and play player, a middle, like a QB6 ish, because that's roughly what you could, and what we did. Denny Carter and I last year on Living the Stream did stream a QB6. But a guy that I'm targeting a lot is Sam Bradford, just because of his early season schedule, being in the offense that he's in. He has that upside. I'm not a huge Bradford guy from a real football perspective, but you have to love what any quarterback in that system. I think if you can get him late enough, he's rising a little bit. Ryan Tannehill has that top 5 upside with all their new weapons. And then if you move down a little bit more, I think that you're fine with just taking a shot with someone like Colin Kaepernick. Just going YOLO. And
that was my next question. So I'm glad. I was going to say, what's your thought on Colin Kaepernick? Because I've taken a lot of heat. I'm like one of the only people that has him inside of
in the world
that has him in the top 10. So do you see potential there because of his numbers increasing year after year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're drafting him in the 13th round, let's say, and it doesn't matter if he doesn't pan out, because your worst case scenario is that you're streaming quarterbacks, and that's a very, very viable option. But with Kaepernick, I think game script is going to be very interesting with him. I think he's going to be able to get those scrambling yards because that offensive line is so poor right now. And I'm not I don't like to overstate what a rushing quarterback can do in fantasy, but we have seen examples of rushing quarterbacks like Tim Tebow being able to be incredibly fantasy relevant because of what they can do with their legs. I think, we have seen Kaepernick as a very, very fantasy relevant quarterback in the past, and the fact that he's so cheap now, there's some upside there because of what we know. And it's not like you're investing a 6th round pick in the guy.
So a guy we get asked about a lot is Tom Brady. And my answer is always the same. I said, look at his last couple years. He's actually been a sub-average quarterback one who always gets drafted very high. We have the suspension this year. What are you advising people to do on Tom Brady?
Yeah, I'm telling them to avoid the situation completely. I mean, the thing is that not only is he potentially going to miss those games, but if you do draft him, you have to hold him onto your bench for those 4 weeks, and that's you don't want to have wasted space on your bench during the first 4 weeks of the season, where that's where all the waiver wire gems are coming out and guys are getting hurt and so on and so forth. So, that's one aspect. Then the other aspect, which you hit on, is that those middle round quarterbacks, like I can actually, I might have written a book called The Late Round Quarterback, but I actually can get behind an early round quarterback, an early round stud like Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers, much more than I can get behind a guy like Matt Ryan, a guy like Tom Brady. Those guys that you're getting in the 7th round, let's say, maybe even the 6th round in some home leagues, or 5th round, those guys are just completely replaceable in fantasy football. Like Matt Ryan, sure, he's a safe option. He essentially just epitomizes a QB8. Like that's what Matt Ryan is. He doesn't finish higher than a QB7 any single season that he plays. But you're drafting him for this floor, but this floor that's completely replaceable through streaming. So Tom Brady kind of falls into that. He's a little bit better than Matt Ryan, but at the same time, I'm not targeting him at all because of those first 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, so we have, we give the advice of essentially what you just said. I like the top guys and the back guys, but no matter how often we give that advice, I think most people are really uncomfortable streaming quarterbacks, and so they look for those average guys. I was going to bring up Matt Ryan because I know myself and Mike, we have Matt Ryan as our number 3 quarterback just statted out. We believe in Kyle Shanahan's system coming in. Right. And you wrote an article that I believe says, please, I love the title, please stop drafting Matt Ryan so high in fantasy football. So we can argue here. I understand the past being that he's been very, very average. But since we've been talking about projecting the future, do you not see any potential upside with the Shanahan system and Julio Jones being healthy and those things that would propel him to a top-tier finish? Is that out of the question for you?
No, I don't think it's out of the question at all. Like, I mean, it's certainly in his realm of possibilities. It's just a matter of, like, banking on that and seeing where you can draft him. So if you're using middle-round equity on a guy like Ryan, who in the past, we have, a 7-8 year sample on the guy, who in the past has just been just a replaceable guy. Like that's mostly the reason that I'm avoiding him, just because when you look back on a season and you look at the top tier quarterbacks, not only are they not always the guys that people have drafted early, like last year where we saw Peyton Manning and Drew Brees, But really, the only two of those quarterbacks are you getting a decent to significant advantage from a week-to-week perspective. So what I mean by that is to me, if you think that Matt Ryan can put up Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers numbers this year as to what many people think that those two quarterbacks will put up, then sure, like that's a steal where you're getting Matt Ryan. If he can be that elite quarterback, then certainly. I'm using the historical evidence to just kind of project of what Matt Ryan kind of is. But I do love Shanahan. I love that offense. I think it's going to be really solid.
So the last guy we'll touch on is Joe Flacco. We are huge supporters of Mark Trestman. We are on that team. I know that you constantly talk about being on Team Trestman. Are you supporting Joe Flacco at all? Are you taking any stock in him?
I still am kind of just treating him as a streamer this season, mostly because the weapons there are not very strong, and now Perriman's just kind of dealing with this tendon injury. But I'm certainly on team. I'm on Team Trestman mostly for what he does for running backs, to be fair, and what he does with them out of the backfield. I think that he's seen success in his first year with quarterbacks, so that's the upside with Flacco. But at the same time, there's just so many quarterbacks out there that I'm not going to necessarily be stuck on a guy like Flacco, even though, sure, he could have top 10 quarterback upside. But again, I'm only looking for upside if you can finish maybe in the top 2 or 3.
Right. So we've been talking to JJ Zachariason, editor-in-chief of the small, tiny, super tiny Numberfire.com that no one's ever heard of. Also hosts the podcast Live in the Stream. And where can people find you, JJ?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at LateRoundQB, and then obviously, like you said, over at Numberfire.com, just cranking out as much content as we can.
Yeah, so thank you, JJ. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks to JJ once again for joining us. I think you got a lot of perspective in terms of starting quarterbacks in fantasy football, the importance of waiting. If you have one of those late-tier guys, I think that helps fill in the gaps for a lot of people. It doesn't mean, if you're in a 2-quarterback league and scarcity is not an issue anymore, then you need to adjust. You're going to draft quarterbacks high. You're going to draft them in the first round. You're probably going to have 10 of them gone soon. But in terms of a normal league, it gives you good perspective on that. So we're going to go through our top 20 and maybe more if we got time quarterbacks.
So before we get to our top 20 quarterbacks, I just want to take a moment and say, fellas, your beards have never looked better.
I agree.
I looked in the mirror a little bit before we started the show. My beard has never looked better. And you know why?
Tell me.
I know why.
Because we've been using Handsome Fancy beard products. We get the oil, we get the cream, we get the nice sheen. The hair just looks so healthy.
You're ready to draft.
I wish we were drafting right now because people would be very intimidated by how great my beard looks and smells.
I literally have been putting it on like 3 times a day.
Oh.
I like after you put it on, the smell, and I'm like, I want more.
We appreciate it here in the studio when you put that on because
covers up a lot of bad news.
a lot of bad news. I like that.
So head to handsomefancy.com. Use promo code BALLERS and you can get 15% off.
You really got Mike on
got me
that
with
one.
the bad news.
The bad news. All right, let's talk quarterbacks.
Quarterbacks.
All right, so right after we tell you how possibly unimportant quarterback selection will be, we're going to go through our top 20 so you have a good perspective on which guys you can wait on, which guys we really like. Number 1, maybe you've heard of him, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Deal with it,
the
people.
Discount double check himself. It doesn't get better than Aaron Rodgers. We've been on a lot of shows. People are like, Luck Rodgers.
Easy decision for me.
For us, it's been easy. What's the other story? Because Andrew Luck's our number 2. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so clearly those two are a cut above everybody else. But Aaron Rodgers, in my rankings, is even a cut above Luck. Aaron Rodgers is one of the most efficient quarterbacks of all time. You don't need a certain type of game or a certain type of game flow for him to be great. And in addition to how good he has always been, he has always performed as pretty much a top 2 quarterback. In addition to that, they're trying to speed up the offense, run more offensive plays, and put up more points. I want a piece of that Aaron Rodgers pie.
I don't think that there's a reason to kind of overly split hairs on them either. We like Rodgers for a few reasons more than Luck, which is kind of like track record. in history and efficiency and not throwing interceptions.
It's called, since starting in 2008, he's been a top 2 fantasy quarterback every year except when he got hurt.
Since 2008?
Yeah.
And he's being drafted behind Luck, which is just why I love him even more, just because the value is
Madness.
All right, so number 2 is Andrew Luck. He threw the ball last year. Obviously, Rodgers was banged up. He threw the ball about 100 times more than Rodgers last year. They brought in Philip Dorsett. They brought in Frank Gore. He has gotten better every single year. He's been a professional quarterback, and that team should be very good, and they're playing in a division with a lot of winnable games. So Andrew Luck has a lot of things going for him. He's great if you're in a dynasty league, if you can lock him down. He's one of the 2 difference-making quarterbacks. Would you agree?
There's a huge tier for me, a drop-off on points. After these 2 guys...
No Sean Moreno-sized.
Yeah, no Sean Moreno-sized gap here.
Tiers.
You
No
don't
Sean
remember
Moreno's
the No
tiers?
Sean
You've never
tiers?
seen
No,
this?
I've never seen the no Sean
come
tiers.
on,
I'm not even
man.
joking.
Come on.
It looks like the Kool-Aid man is falling out of his face.
Wow.
These tiers are gigantic.
It's in the middle of a national anthem.
The man was moved. I'm not knocking the man for being moved.
He just has bigger tiers than all of us.
Yeah, America.
Combined.
Now you understand the joke.
All right.
Go
Well,
on.
the no Sean Moreno-sized tier is right here. People, if you are one of those guys that has to draft QB, you're like, look, QBs win every year.
Hey,
when I
we
look
like
back.
those. We like
No, I know, but I'm just saying the
But
most common thing I
We
always
like
hear
them, but
is,
that's how they talk, Mike.
that is how they talk. I mean, I used to be that.
You used
the
to be
most
that guy.
common
Remember that?
thing I
We
always
couldn't bring
hear
him on the show.
is I look back at my league and the guy with the best quarterback has won. Like that's what they say. And the reason is because the other people in the league, generally speaking, aren't doing what we talked about. It aren't streaming. Streaming doesn't just say, okay, now we get a quarterback. It's playing a better matchup every week. So, yeah, if nobody's streaming in a league, then the better quarterbacks win. But the point here is that if you have to take a quarterback, go after one of these 2 guys. Take them in the second round and have them. That's my opinion. If you're a quarterback player, grab one of these guys.
My one quick warning on Andrew Luck, his first 2 years, 23 touchdowns each year. He had 40 last year. Now, I'm not saying he can't do it again, but if those touchdowns go down, you're going to be really, really upset you spent a first or second round pick on Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I mean, you think about going into the season last year and what you thought of Andrew Luck.
And why he was so great last year is because he was a 4th round pick. So
Sure.
for a 4th round pick, you got the best quarterback.
Yeah, I think he is pretty special, but you're right. I mean, even in years where Peyton Manning had huge touchdown years, there's always a regression. It's hard to keep those numbers up. I mean,
The year after Tom Brady's
Stafford had a
huge
40
year.
touchdown year.
Yep. The year
That's
after,
exactly what I'm thinking
all
about.
of those. It's very common for guys to have that huge year, and then the next year
Which
they get
is
drafted.
exactly why Rodgers finishing first or second for like 7 straight years is why we like him more.
Yep.
So, all right, 3, 4, 5 is Matt Ryan, Peyton Manning, and Russell Wilson. We talked about the fact that we're exceptionally high on Matt Ryan with JJ, so I think we've exhausted Ryan quite a bit. But Peyton, Wilson, what do we think? Wilson has a lot of value in 4-point passing touchdown leagues because just like Kaepernick, he gets a lot of yards on the ground, just like Newton. He accumulates a lot of yards on the ground, and it's a difference maker for him. And he was the number 3 overall
last year,
fantasy quarterback last
and
year.
you have him 3. You have Russell Wilson 3.
In standard leagues, I do.
Yeah, we're actually very differed because I have him at 9. I'm not completely buying in that he will repeat the running performance of last year, and I think he has to come at least very close to repeating last year if he wants to be highly
You don't think
relevant.
touchdowns go up with Jimmy Graham?
They may, but he needs to run for 600 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he
Not saying
dips,
he can't,
I think he'll run.
if he dips on the running at all and then just increases in the passing, it's a wash.
He's pretty safe, is what I think. I think Wilson's pretty safe.
I think he is too. I've got him at 5 on my board. One thing I think people need to realize when they're drafting, because I've heard some confusion here, is they know that 6-point touchdown leagues, quarterbacks are more important. I don't know that that's true, but that's what they hear. And they think Russell Wilson is even better than he finished 3 last year. But in 6-point passing quarterback leagues, Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick, Cam Newton, those guys take a hit. They're not that great.
Because their their touchdown numbers are not the prolific 30-plus.
On throwing, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's what I mean. Yeah, and passing touchdowns. So, We have Wilson at 5. We have Peyton at 4. Still believing that Peyton's going to get it done there. I agree. I don't think we're going to see him just drop off the map and the ball go to C.J. Anderson every play of the season.
Before he hurt his leg, through 11 games, he was on pace for over 5,000 yards and almost 50 touchdowns.
Yeah, decent.
Don't forget that because he got hurt.
I've won a couple championships with Peyton Manning as my quarterback with big gaps between the years, just because he can carry you when he's on. Ben Roethlisberger at 6, Drew Brees at 7, and Ryan Tannehill at 8.
I want to hear Jason talk about Big Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to hear me talk about Drew Brees as well.
Big Ben is where on his rankings?
4. He moved up from 5 to 4, went over Russell Wilson.
Well, let me lay some stats for Jason to talk about. The second best offense last year, second best passing offense, 7th best scoring offense, but obviously 2 humongous games. 6 touchdown games. 2 6-touchdown games.
2 humongous games, but 8 games of 1 or less touchdowns. And I don't think that part of it is going to repeat. I think that did he throw over 5,000 yards last year or right there? I think he was basically at 5,000.
Yeah, he was. I actually think he tied Drew Brees. Him and Drew Brees, believe, had the most passing yards in the league.
So
49-52.
Yeah, and if I look at these offenses and say, you take Drew Brees on one hand and Ben Roethlisberger on the other, because I am kind of polar on those guys. And I say, which offense is trending up for the passing game? Which offense looks like things are clicking more, that new weapons are coming into fruition? Martavis Bryant is just looking beastly. Everything is clicking there, and that offense that took a couple years to kind of get going under the new OC a couple years ago is full steam ahead, whereas Drew Brees, I've got him pretty low. I've talked about this before. I'm off. There's just no way he could be on any of my teams for where I've got him ranked.
So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is clearly a Big Ben Drew Brees water bet. Oh, because for me, I mean, it's simple for me. Drew Brees is the pick between the two. I think the analyst overreaction of Drew Brees is what you're suffering from, which we can get you some medicine for that. But I'm not ready to throw Drew Brees away just because Jimmy Graham and Kenny Stills, who I don't think is a premier talent, is gone from the team.
You're sleeping on Stills, man.
Of course I will, just like everybody else. That's why he's not on the Saints anymore.
Well, C.J. Spiller hurt right now is not going to help him. We presumably he's going to come back, and I'm sure he's going to come back strong, but he's dropping a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about Drew Brees, just so you know. Drew Brees has not always been
his favorite color is blue.
His eyes are gorgeous.
Car is green.
He's not always been a touchdown guy. He has always been a very, very good quarterback. But, a couple years ago, on the Saints, he threw 34 touchdowns, 33 touchdowns, 33 touchdowns, 26 touchdowns, 28. That was all on the Saints. Then all of a sudden he exploded as their offense changed its philosophy, and he went from 33 to 46. Since that time, he's trended down 46, 43, 39, 33 last year, and now he lost Jimmy Graham, who he threw 10 touchdowns to. He is older, and the offense is wanting to run more. So, it could be analyst overreaction because he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's fantastic. I would take him on any of my NFL teams. But I think that there's a regression here, and his name is what's carrying him, not his performance. Last year, he didn't always look good. It wasn't a matter of just stats. On film, he wasn't the same Drew Brees. So I think that is a problem. His deep ball wasn't the famous Drew Brees deep ball. So, I'll take that water bet.
All right. Well, I feel like
water bet.
I got to say something.
Hold on. Because I need to counter one of those points for him because you have your trajectory. He's got 7 straight 30-plus touchdown years. Big Ben has 1 year in the last 8 where he threw 30 touchdowns. So
they've been a defensive team. Now their defense stinks.
I will go with what I see from Drew Brees on the field.
So we got a Big Ben versus Drew Brees. Okay, this is what I say. That was incredibly passionate and moving and did not sway my opinion at all.
I can see you going there.
So you're Drew Brees.
Yes.
All right.
Well, get in on that.
So 6.
No, you can't say that.
All right. Yeah, I'll gladly lock on. I just didn't want you to have to deal with 2 cups of water.
I'll take them. I'll take them.
Ryan Tannehill at 8, Cam Newton at 9. I think we put these consensus together before the Benjamin news. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So Newton's probably coming down for me.
Really?
Yeah, because he just doesn't. I mean, Benjamin was a touchdown machine for them. I don't know what Funchess is.
He's a bunches of Funchess.
That's good.
All right, we'll get it back
Thank
down.
you. So let's talk Tannehill first.
Yes.
One of the big headlines for Ryan Tannehill is the fact that he has improved every year in the NFL in completions, completion percentage, yards thrown, touchdowns, rushing yards. Pretty good.
Pretty good. That's what you look
You
for.
like trends
Is that bad?
look that way.
Is that bad?
Does that stop at some point? Well, yeah, it's going to stop at some point. Is it this year?
No way.
No, this is going to be the best offense he's ever been a part of. I mean, I think Kenny Stills is a good wide receiver, or is at least comparable to where Mike Wallace is in his career now. Jarvis Landry, the connection with Tannehill and Jarvis Landry is automatic. It also helps that Jarvis Landry only catches 4-yard passes. But you add in Greg Jennings, who he had his times on Minnesota last year.
They like him there.
He's a strong veteran presence. Devontae Parker miraculously is off of the pup, so maybe he gets some time in. Maybe he is ready for the season. And my man Jordan Cameron is also there, and Ryan Tannehill likes him some tight end. I just think and Lamar Miller. I mean, this team is fully loaded, locked and loaded. They have an up-tempo offense. I like Tannehill very much.
All right, 10, 11, 12 is Eli Manning, Colin Kaepernick, and Tony Romo. I want to publicly apologize to my two co-hosts here for how high Colin Kaepernick has ended up because of my ranking.
You should apologize.
Just for you guys.
Apologize to me for how low Eli Manning is.
Wait,
but I will not apologize.
Where is Colin on our consensus? What
11.
number? That's the
where
number
did you
I
have
have
him?
him.
You have
I
him at
have
11.
him right at 11.
I think I have him at 7.
So, yeah.
I really like Kaepernick because of the same arguments that Mike made for Tannehill, in the sense that his numbers have improved almost every year in the league. It's going to be the same Russell Wilson argument. He has to run for a certain baseline of rushing yards to give you value. But the thing is, just like we talked about with JJ, so we don't need to talk about Kaepernick too much. But he is available so late that if you take a chance on him and you swing and miss, don't come crying to me.
Yeah, if you swing and you miss on Kaepernick, this is what I will concede, is it's so late, you can easily get back up, dust yourself off, and grab another quarterback and try again. And grab a good one like Sam Bradford.
I agree. So Kaepernick is somebody to take a chance on. Eli Manning, we like Eli a lot.
Yes, that was one of the best offensive years of his career, and he threw the ball over 600 times. He's now in the Ben McAdoo system. We've talked about how uncomfortable and how bad that team looked the first few weeks, learning the new system, and then everything you saw it clicking. You saw the offense start moving, and then a guy you might have heard of, Odell Beckham Jr., came onto the scene and just dominated. So I really like Eli Manning. I like the weapons there. The jury's still out for me on Cruz, but I think Ruben Randall is good enough. Larry Donnell had times of flashing, and they're a passing team. They're not going to be able to run very well. If they want to score points, it's through the air.
Tony Romo at number 12, Matt Stafford at 13, Sam Bradford at 14, and trending upward, I think, for all of us. But let's talk about Stafford for a second, because we mentioned it. He had a 41 touchdown year in 2011. A lot of attempts, but those have been going down under the Caldwell regime. But you get Calvin Johnson back, and that you cannot underestimate the value of Calvin Johnson to a quarterback. So I put him more in that 2013 numbers range, which is right around 30 touchdowns. Still going to throw interceptions, but this will be, hopefully for him, the first full season of having Tate and Calvin together, healthy. If they're healthy, you like Amir Abdullah, Mike.
I do.
From what I understand.
I do. A little bit.
Ebron.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've got
I'm just saying another option.
Potential weapons. So if those guys all stay healthy, can Stafford surprise people and be a value?
He could. What's interesting about Stafford's numbers last year is over 4,000 yards, only 22 touchdowns, but 12 interceptions. He was actually a very good NFL quarterback. He was just not a good fantasy quarterback. I am notoriously hard on snapback Stafford, but I have to give credit for what he did last year and what they win 11 games.
Yeah, they were great.
The Lions were a very good team.
I think they'll be a very good team again this year, which means you're going to be winning a lot of games again.
but I like Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate. I'm not high on Stafford on a week-to-week basis.
All right, let's move on to 15, 16, and
one quick. I feel like maybe we're too low on Romo. People do this every year.
With Romo.
Yeah,
I don't think they do it every year with Romo. I think you could
pretty
be
close.
right now because of the amount of rushing attempts last year, and Romo fits into 15, 16, 17 is Rivers, Palmer, and Bridgewater, and I was just about to say Phillip Rivers is one of the guys that I think people just kind of like don't want to draft, and Romo might be in that category too.
They were actually polar opposites last year. Romo started very slow and won many people championships because he was dominant.
Including you.
Yeah, including me. He was very, very good second half of the year. Phillip Rivers came out scorching hot, and then the second half just completely fell off. So if you draft both of those guys.
There you go. You can probably get them because nobody wants to draft either of them, at least in drafts that I've been running through. And so I like Rivers. I think Rivers is perennially underrated. He's going to be there. He has Keenan Allen. He has weapons, but they will be a run-first team. I think we talked about that. So he's a good streaming guy. So Carson Palmer at 16, Bridgewater at 17. What can Bridgewater really be? Because we like what he looks like on the field, but what can he really be?
Bridgewater can absolutely be an RB1.
He's going to change over to running back?
Yes, he's going to change over to running back.
Is
he's
that on Yahoo?
Talented on the legs.
Yahoo gives you those multi-positional things.
That would be awesome because then you could start two quarterbacks in a one-quarterback league. I would definitely take Teddy Bridgewater.
He'd be the top running back.
Yeah. No, he can absolutely 100% be a quarterback one. He has the talent to be a long-time Pro Bowl caliber NFL quarterback. I could see him reaching. I mean, if we're talking potential here, not expectation, I could see him very easily throwing over 4,000 yards, getting near 30 touchdowns, doing things that push him up into the range in his sophomore year of essentially what we're looking for Ryan Tannehill to do. That's height. That's potential total. I don't expect that to happen because I think they're going to be a little bit more conservative because they're going to have the ability to run the ball with Adrian Peterson and be in games where they're not having to play as up-tempo. So, and being that he's still a sophomore and that he still tends to check down a little bit more, but he has the talent and the skill. I expect a huge third-year breakout, but
I was gonna say I'm not ready. I'm not ready this year for Bridgewater. I think he's fine. I think he's gonna be a good NFL quarterback that doesn't translate over to fantasy like people are projecting in some leagues. And the other thing I'm concerned about with him is you watch him play. He's small. He's a small guy, and he looks like he could get injured. To me.
So, Mike, you've got him the highest. You've got him 12. I've got him 17, and Mike, Andy, you've got him 22. Ooh. So
yeah, I think for sure that he'll be a back end quarterback one. And speaking of ceiling, I think the highest he could be would be a 7 or 8 QB. But
but I can get behind that philosophy that maybe he can get to that back half first guy.
But for a guy for a 12, a back half.
But don't you see him going? I see him going very high in certain leagues. Like there seem to be certain leagues where people are just drafting him super high
because we always say it just takes that one person to be high on a player. But we're talking about a group of players right now where you don't necessarily have to focus on just one quarterback. You got Palmer, Bridgewater, for you guys Kaepernick, Romo, Bradford. They're all in this group of a tier that you can look at while it's slowly depleting and then jump in when it's almost empty.
I wanted to look up the average draft position really quickly of Bridgewater and okay, so Rivers is still going ahead of Bridgewater. That's what I was curious about because I was thinking in a lot of leagues I've seen it the opposite where Bridgewater is going ahead of Rivers, but that's not the case yet. So maybe the hype train isn't too.
Well, and like I said, they're all so close to each other.
It's preferential.
These are the type of players though that show
why
when you get to the 7th or 8th round and you're getting scared because some of the bigger name quarterbacks are being taken off the board. You don't need to pull the trigger on a quarterback there. There are guys that are 16, 17, 18th quarterback off the board that are still have high potential, and you could stream great.
All right, so 18, 19, and 20 are Joe Flacco, Alex Smith, and Andy Dalton. Okay.
What
Jay?
is that? Hands. The hands are up.
The hands are.
The hands are up.
Their hands are. I need you guys to accept my apology up front. But I think that right now,
Don't
I'm gonna say
do
it, man. I don't think Andy Dalton is getting the love that he deserves.
Wait. I think Romo. I'm like, you know what, Romo? He should probably be hired. You guys are like, yeah, maybe not. No, Andy Dalton is the guy who should be hired.
Well, but I mean, Andy Dalton isn't where Romo was. Andy Dalton, we're seeing as 20th. We're seeing as the last third of the quarterbacks. A couple years ago, he finished.
That is correct.
A couple years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, but he finished as the number 3 quarterback. Is that wrong?
I believe that is accurate.
That is accurate.
3 on the paper, 20 in our hearts.
Yes, exactly. And so my point is, AJ Green is back and healthy. We just talked about how great he was. You've got a lot of weapons there. We're big on Tyler Eifert. We're big on Sanu.
He is
but
underdrafted.
Andy Dalton, because, I don't know if it's just because he's the redheaded stepchild, but we just don't like him.
He's 22 right now on ADP. So he is further down than we have him in our consensus. He is the 22nd quarterback off the board.
Yeah, and
he will absolutely be streamable.
Yeah,
I will completely agree with that.
Because he is a boom-bust guy. He has his big games where he throws 3 touchdowns to Andy Dalton, and then he has 3 games where he doesn't. So oh, my goodness. Dude, my brain is
on
gone
fire,
right now.
man.
Yeah.
Andy Dalton throws, steps back, throws to Andy Dalton.
Didn't he catch a touchdown pass last year?
He did.
But he
didn't throw it. He didn't throw it.
But that's next. That's the next step here. Is Andy Dalton to Andy Dalton. I want to
Jason
see
needs
it.
help.
That is the ultimate double stuff.
Yep.
If you can get a quarterback to throw to himself.
I mean, the point is fair. If we're at 20 and that's below ADP, I mean, if you want to stream him, you can. I don't like doing it. I also, when you look back at the game logs last year, regardless of the injuries, you saw this direct correlation with Jeremy Hill, high carry numbers on wins, low carry numbers on losses. Yep. I mean, I think 2 of the 3 last losses, Hill had like 8 and 10 carries. And so if they get behind, then Dalton's slinging it. But I don't think they're going to be behind too much. I mean, I think they're projected for 9 wins, something like that. So
before we move on, I think we just have to talk about one name that was not in our list of top 20 guys.
Tomas
Brady.
Yeah, and there are plenty of reasons for that.
My sunglasses are going on my face. Deal with it.
Yeah, he's 21 on our consensus rankings. They're the big reason is the games he's going to miss.
Yeah, I have him statted right now at 12 games.
Yeah.
So if it comes out that he wins the appeal or and he's playing 16, he'll be up in our consensus because I'm going to change my stats.
I agree. And just so people know, you can go to the website, thefantasyfootballers.com, click on the rankings tab. You'll see our rankings. We're going to update them. I know I'm going to update mine tomorrow. Jason did some updates tonight that he's going to publish. But let me give you 21 through, where do we go through? Let's go 21 through 30, just so people know some names. 21, Brady. 22, Mariota. 23, Cutler. 24, Carr. 25, Bortles. 26, Griffin. 27, Castle. 28, Winston. 29, Geno, who is eventually going to return. And Nick Foles at 30. So we're
just going to leave 2 teams off.
Okay, so Hoyer 31, McCown 32. Yeah. So that's the entirety of our quarterback rankings.
I thought I changed. Maybe I hadn't updated my Geno to Fitzpatrick.
We don't have time for mailbag today, but send in your questions. Go to the website, thefantasyfootballers.com. Click on the submit a question button. You can also call us, leave us a voicemail question, 302-464-TFFB. Good show today, guys. Another shout out and thanks to JJ Zachariason. The quarterback topic is an interesting one. I like being able to kind of go through it in detail so we don't just come on the show and we say, stream a quarterback. Well, what does that mean? And now we got a chance to do that. Do you guys have any parting thoughts?
What are we talking about tomorrow?
Tight ends.
Tight ends tomorrow.
We're all agreeing. Again. We're all in agreement. 35 minutes, Tyler Eifert.
All Tyler Eifert tomorrow.
Eifert show.
If he comes on the
Every
show,
one of
I
his
agree
snaps,
with that.
we're going to break it down.
If he wants to come on, we can talk to him about it.
Tyler, if you're listening.
Yep. Ping us. We're on Twitter at the FF Ballers. And
we're falling apart here.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So, hey, stay tuned tomorrow. We'll be back at the FF Ballers on Twitter, thefantasyfootballers.com. And we got a good show for you tomorrow. Stay tuned.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com and follow us on Twitter at the FF Ballers.